The security gate clicked shut behind her like a verdict. Amara Reed's heels tapped against the marble, precise and steady, but the air inside the building was already colder than the January wind outside. 3 guards stood at the reception like fixed pillars. One of them, a man with a shaved head and clipped tone, glanced at her badge, then at her face. "This entrance is for executives only," he said. The emphasis hung like a blade. Amara's fingers tightened around the black leather folder in her hand. "I am an executive. Reed Consulting. Scheduled for 9:30 with the board." He didn't look down at the schedule. "You'll need to wait outside. Deliveries don't enter through the lobby." A low murmur rippled from the cluster of suited men behind the security barrier. Someone snickered softly, a sound like glass cracking. Another man, tall, silver hair, custom navy suit, stepped forward. His ID badge glittered in the light. "We can't have random people walking in. Standards matter. Random?" Her voice hit the marble floor like iron. A woman in a blue blazer leaned toward the silver-haired man, whispering just loud enough for Amara to hear. "This is the meeting where we announce the acquisition." She shouldn't even be near the boardroom. A wave of heat burned behind Amara's eyes, but her face remained unreadable. The folder in her hand held contracts worth millions. She had built a company from nothing, signed deals none of these men could have dreamed of. And yet, "Step aside," the guard repeated. Amara's breath slowed. One line cut through the air, clear and sharp. "You'll regret this." The elevator doors chimed open behind the security gate. The board members began walking in without her. The lobby smelled faintly of polished stone and expensive silence. Amara Reed walked in wearing a charcoal suit cut sharp as a blade. The air shifted the moment she crossed the threshold. Not loudly, but enough that every head turned. The security desk sat in front of a sweeping staircase. 3 men in matching black uniforms watched her approach. Their posture wasn't neutral. It never was. "Badge," the tallest one barked. She handed it over without breaking stride. He scanned it, frowned, then glanced at her face. "This entrance is for executives only." Amara's jaw tightened, but her voice remained even. "I am an executive." He tapped the badge like he was knocking on a locked door. "Not on the list." Behind him, a group of men in tailored suits murmured. A few wore lanyards with gold-trimmed badges, the kind reserved for board-level meetings. One of them, silver hair, expensive watch, laughed under his breath. It wasn't a laugh meant to be hidden. "You might have taken a wrong turn," he said. "Deliveries are around back." She didn't look at him. She stared at the guard. "Check again." He didn't. He slid the badge back across the counter like returning something contaminated. "Lobby's open. Meeting's not." Lena, her assistant, rushed through the revolving doors, breath quick, tablet in hand. "Mr. Ellis confirmed your name yesterday." "Ma'am," the guard cut her off. "Step aside." The elevator chimed. The sound sliced through the room. Executives began passing through the gate one by one. Suits brushed against each other like silk and power. Silver hair. Ellis paused as he swiped in. "This isn't personal. It's protocol." Her folder was heavy in her hand. Contract drafts. Presentation slides. Months of work. She didn't raise her voice. "You'll regret this." The elevator doors closed on their laughter. The boardroom door opened with the slow drag of a verdict already decided. Amara stepped in, the sound of her heels clipped by the thick carpet. The long glass table gleamed beneath sterile overhead lights. Screens lined the wall, already showing her presentation, except someone else was standing at the head of the room speaking. Jonathan Hale, Operations Director. A man who once asked if she really understood international finance. He was flipping through her slides as if they were his. "And that's why this merger positions us as market leaders," he said smoothly. "Our team has structured the financials to protect shareholder value and limit unnecessary exposure." Her seat, third on the left, was occupied. The silver-haired chairman, Ellis, looked up as if she were late to a party she was never invited to. "Ms. Reed, how punctual." She didn't move to the wall like they expected. She walked to the table, pulled out a chair at the end, and sat. The room tightened. A silent understanding passed between several faces, mostly men, all comfortably settled in their inherited authority. Jonathan didn't pause. "We've secured external partnerships projected to increase revenue by 16% over the next 2 quarters. My projections." She watched him press the remote, slide after slide, her strategy being stripped of her voice in real time. Lena slipped in through the door and froze at the sight. Amara lifted one hand slightly. No, there was no point in interrupting yet. Ellis leaned back in his chair. You know, Amara, communication is crucial in high-level negotiations. Timeliness, structure, hierarchy. If people don't respect those frameworks, things get muddled, like stolen work, she said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it cut through his performative civility. Jonathan's hand paused briefly on the clicker. Then the smirk returned. We're all on the same team here. No, she said flatly. You're on my slides. The woman from the lobby, the one who had whispered earlier, spoke from the far side of the table. Let's not make this emotional. We've already moved past the original draft. Your role isn't a good fit anymore. Fit. She knew that word. It wasn't about competence. It was code. Not the right face. Not the right presence. Not the right kind of power. Ellis steepled his fingers. The board appreciates your early contributions, of course, but after review, the strategic lead position has been reassigned. It's about optics, Amara. Optics matter in acquisitions like this. She laughed once quietly. Optics. The other executives shifted in their seats. No one looked directly at her. Silence was part of the structure. They didn't have to speak the thing they all understood. Jonathan closed the presentation with a clean click. Any questions? Amara rose slowly. Not rushed, not flustered. Her movements were precise, controlled. You just presented a strategy you didn't build. You're using projections you didn't run, and you're pretending I was never part of the architecture of this deal. Ellis didn't flinch. We're protecting the company's image. That's bigger than any one person. Unless that person doesn't look like what you want on your glossy investor deck, she said. A low murmur. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed into a hand. Ellis leaned forward slightly, voice softened in the way men used when they believed they held all the cards. This is business, Amara, not personal. You'd do well to remember the difference. I remember everything, she said. She walked toward the door. One man muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to catch it. She'll get over it. They always do. She didn't look back. Outside the boardroom, the sound of the elevator echoed like it had that morning. Cold, clean, final. But beneath the hum of the building, a different sound began building in her head. Calculation. They'd locked the walls. She was already looking for the cracks. The elevator ride down was silent except for the low hum of mechanical gears. Amara stood straight, arms crossed, the reflection of her face fractured by the mirrored paneling. The numbers on the display ticked down like a slow countdown. She stepped out into the marble lobby. The receptionist, a young man who earlier had refused to let her pass without confirmation, glanced up and then down again as if she were invisible. The security guard at the turnstile didn't meet her eyes. Institutional silence was louder than any slur. Lena was waiting near the revolving door, breathing hard like she'd run from upstairs. Amara, she said quietly, falling into step beside her. They blindsided you. Amara didn't stop walking. No, they planned it. The heavy glass door pushed open. The air outside was damp, sharp New York in early spring. Taxis hissed over wet pavement. The kind of weather that made everything feel colder than it was. They were circulating new decks last night, Lena whispered, catching up. Jonathan had Ellis's approval. They looped you out of every revision. You thought they wouldn't be that predictable, Amara said. Lena's voice dropped lower. This isn't just about this deal. Ellis has been floating rumors that the board wants a more traditional face to present the merger to the international investors. He said it in those words, traditional. Amara kept walking. People on the sidewalk passed around her, unaware of the quiet detonation in her chest. She stopped beneath the steel awning, turned, and faced Lena directly. Say it the way he meant it. Lena's throat tightened. He meant white. The sound of a horn cut through the air. Amara's jaw clenched once. The simplicity of the lie was always the same. Traditional optics, professional fit. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate exclusion. Are you going to fight this? Lena asked, breath shallow. Amara looked up at the towering glass facade of the building. She had built that strategy from the ground up. The numbers, the positioning, the timeline. And they had erased her name before the ink dried. She didn't answer Lena. Back inside on the upper floors, the boardroom was already being reset for lunch. Jonathan was laughing with two VPs. A bottle of imported water clicked against glass. "Reed's good, but she's not market ready," Jonathan said. "Investors like what they know. That's how this works. It's not personal." Ellis smirked without looking up from his tablet. "She'll either step aside quietly or make noise and get boxed out. Either way, she's done." No one at the table objected. Across the street, Amara's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. "It's not over." She looked up, scanning the street, the taxis, the black umbrellas, the blur of faces. No one familiar. But the message wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Lena touched her elbow. "What are you going to do?" Amara exhaled once. "What they don't expect." She walked toward the curb, away from the building, her heels cutting through the wet pavement like metronome ticks. The weight pressing on her chest didn't feel like defeat. It felt like ignition. Behind her, in that glass tower, they had closed every door. She was already planning how to buy the building. The restaurant's interior was dim, a deliberate kind of privacy that expensive people bought to avoid being overheard. Amara sat at the corner table, back to the wall, watching the reflection of the entrance in a darkened window. She never sat with her back exposed anymore, not here, not now. A man in a navy suit entered exactly 5 minutes late. Ezra Clark, corporate attorney. Discretion for sale. He approached without smiling. "You're making people nervous," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Good," she replied. Ezra didn't order. He never wasted words. "I've seen your name disappear from strategy decks before. They call it alignment. It's theft with a tie on." "They made it public this time," Amara said. "They erased me in a room where I built everything they're standing on." Ezra tapped the edge of the table with one finger. "Ellis has political cover. You won't win by pushing him inside the system. You need leverage." "I don't push systems," she said. "I buy them." For the first time, he leaned back. "You've been thinking about this for a while." "Since the first time Ellis called me articulate." The waiter came and left without interrupting. Ezra's voice lowered. "You want to go after the board?" "I want the entire structure under my control," she said. He studied her face. "That means money. A lot of it. I have it," she said. "And I have something better. Timing." Ezra reached into his briefcase, pulled out a slim folder. "Then you'll want this. Ellis has been leaking internal deal terms to an overseas fund. Technically legal, optically ruinous. If someone with standing buys the right voting blocks, the board will turn on him in under a quarter." Amara opened the folder. Documents, email printouts, transaction dates. Nothing emotional, just the bones of power. "You didn't get this from me," Ezra said. "You're not giving it. I'm paying." His jaw twitched. "You're serious?" She looked up at him. "They built walls to keep me out. I'll make them sign my name on every door." Outside, the city roared with evening traffic. Headlights painted stripes of white across her face. Ezra leaned closer. "One more thing. They won't let this happen quietly. They'll smear you before they fall. You need to move fast." "I don't need quiet," she said. "I need precision." He closed the folder, pushed it toward her. "Then don't miss." Amara rose, the file in her hand like a blade. When she stepped out onto the sidewalk, the wind caught her coat, lifting it slightly. Somewhere up on the 40th floor of that tower, Ellis believed the game was finished. He hadn't realized she'd already switched boards. Ellis stood at the head of the conference room like a man who had never known consequence. The skyline stretched behind him, a wall of glass and power. Board members were arriving in slow waves, handshakes and low-voiced greetings wrapped in the smell of money and confidence. Jonathan Hale leaned against the far wall, whispering something to a senior VP. Laughter followed. No one noticed the slight shift in air when the door opened again. Amara walked in. Not a guest. Not a supplicant. She wore black. Sharp, precise lines. A quiet force that didn't ask for permission. Several heads turned. Jonathan's grin faltered for a fraction of a second. Ellis didn't flinch. "Ms. Reed," he said, "we're in the middle of a closed session." "No," she said, placing a folder on the polished table. "You're in the middle of a problem." The room stilled. The kind of silence that isn't neutral. Charged, searching. Ellis's fingers drummed against his chair. "You no longer hold strategic authority on this deal. You're not entitled to—" "Leaked deal terms," she interrupted, sliding the first page forward. "Wire transfer records. Ellis, your offshore connections to Margrave Holdings are sloppy. Predictable. Jonathan stepped forward. What is this? Proof, she said. A whisper rippled through the room. One of the board members leaned in, scanning the papers. Another stood. Ellis's voice hardened. This is baseless. No, she said. It's time-stamped. A younger board member, a man who rarely spoke, said, If this is true, Ellis, you've compromised fiduciary integrity. Jonathan hissed. You don't belong here. Amara didn't look at him. That's what you said before taking credit for my work. I'm not here to belong. I'm here to own. Ellis rose slowly, as if power alone could hold the room together. These accusations will be in the Financial Conduct Authority's inbox by morning, she said, calm as concrete. Unless the board acts before then. Lena, seated near the corner, caught her eye briefly. She had slipped into the room quietly, unnoticed. The weight of institutional power was starting to shift, molecule by molecule. Ellis tried to laugh. It came out brittle. You don't have the capital to play this game. I already do, she said. You just didn't notice the pieces moving. A screen flicked on at the far end of the table. A remote investor feed. Several faces appeared. One voice came through, cold and transactional. Ellis, we've reviewed the documents Ms. Reed sent. You've put the entire structure at risk. For the first time, Ellis's face changed. Not dramatically. Just the smallest tightening at the jaw. This is a hostile move, he said. No, she said. This is ownership. She gathered her folder, turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, voices rose. Board members arguing. Investors recalculating their loyalties. Ellis trying to hold together a structure already cracking down the middle. The fortress was no longer sealed. It was bleeding from the inside. Ellis's office smelled like cedar, arrogance, and old money. He was pacing behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed tight to his ear. The controlled precision he wore in board meetings had cracked. I don't care how it looks, he snapped. We keep control. She can't just walk in here and pull strings she doesn't own. A pause. A voice on the other end. His jaw tightened. Then buy her out, he said. Everyone has a number. The line went dead. He tossed the phone onto the desk hard enough to make the glass water tumbler shiver. Jonathan entered without knocking. They're rattled. Half the board is asking questions. They'll calm down, Ellis said. Jonathan's smirk was thin. She has documentation. She timed this. Ellis stopped pacing. And I have leverage. In a locked drawer, he pulled out a slim folder of his own. Photos, emails, a whisper campaign designed months earlier, ready for exactly this. We'll bleed her credibility before she gets within 10 feet of control. Jonathan leaned over the desk. Media. Whispers first, Ellis said. Anonymous board leaks. A little talk about volatility, emotional instability, makes investors nervous. Once that sticks, we hit harder. Jonathan nodded. She won't see it coming. Ellis gave a short, humorless laugh. She saw the first move. She won't see the second. Across town, Amara stood in the glass lobby of the law firm, watching the rain streak down the windows. Ezra arrived, trenchcoat dripping, expression unreadable. He placed an envelope on the marble bench beside her. They're pushing back, he said. Of course, she replied. They'll go after your credibility. You're a black woman threatening an entrenched power structure. They don't need truth. They just need a narrative. Amara's voice was even. Then I'll own the narrative. Ezra sat down beside her. They're already moving money. Jonathan met with an intermediary this afternoon. If Ellis can consolidate enough voting shares before the emergency session, you'll be outflanked. She tapped the edge of the envelope. Then I moved faster. He stared at her. You've already acquired 37%. That's borderline unprecedented. Not enough, she said. Not yet, she rose, walked to the elevator. Call the investors who hate Ellis more than they like him. Fear moves faster than loyalty. Jonathan's voice filled Ellis's office through the speaker. She's making calls. Aggressive ones. Ellis sat, fingers steepled, listening to the steady sound of the storm outside. Then let her. When the headlines hit tomorrow, she won't be a threat. She'll be a scandal. He leaned back in his chair, watching the city lights smear through the glass like fire and water. People like her climb too fast. They always forget who built the ladder. He didn't notice the phone light blinking silently in the corner, recording every word. Amara's car cut through the rain like a blade. Lena sat beside her, Tablet open, financial dashboard streaming real-time numbers. Investor block from Sable Equity just confirmed, Lena said. 9% locked. Send the papers, Amara said. Lena hesitated. They'll come after you personally. Ellis won't stop at the boardroom. He already started, Amara said. The wipers beat a steady rhythm against the windshield. Her voice was calm, stripped of heat. This isn't just about a seat at the table. I'm taking the table. She opened the envelope Ezra had given her. Photos, wire transfers, timeline, the kind of quiet power Ellis thought no one would touch. He built this system like it could never turn against him, she said. He forgot I helped build it too. Lightning cracked against the skyline. The counterstrike had already begun. The morning light was thin and gray, pressing through the high glass panes of the building like a silent jury. An emergency shareholder session had been called, Ellis's last attempt to contain the fracture. The boardroom was packed. Investors on screens. Journalists swarming the lobby below. Security stationed at the doors. Tension wasn't atmosphere anymore. It was architecture. Ellis stood at the head of the table, chin high, voice carefully measured. This session is to address destabilizing rumors and false allegations that have spread over the last 48 hours. We will restore order. We will reaffirm leadership. This organization was not built on personal ambition. His allies murmured agreement. Jonathan kept to his side, a shadow pretending to be a strategist. The elevator doors opened. Amara stepped in. She didn't wait for permission. The sound of her heels hitting the floor snapped through the room. She walked straight to the center of the table and placed a single folder down. Ellis's voice sharpened. You have no standing here. Her eyes held his. I have controlling interest. The room faltered. A soft ripple moved through it as if oxygen had changed density. Jonathan leaned forward. You're bluffing. She slid a document across the table. Sable Equity. Red Ridge Capital. Torrent Holdings. 49% voting control consolidated in the last 48 hours. Ellis's knuckles whitened against the edge of the table. You moved faster than you, she said. One of the older board members exhaled audibly. A younger one swore under his breath. The investor feeds lit up with movement, people recalculating loyalties in real time. Ellis tried to recover. You think you can run this organization on noise and headlines? No, she said. I can run it because I own it. He laughed once. It was sharp, hollow. You're unstable. Everyone knows it. Leaks are already out. Stories about volatility, emotional behavior. Do you really think they'll trust you with their money? She didn't blink. I think they'll trust facts over gossip. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small audio recorder and pressed play. People like her climb too fast. They always forget who built the ladder. Ellis's own voice filled the room, clear, crisp, undeniable. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was calculation. People deciding where power had shifted. Jonathan swallowed. Ellis's face blanched, then tightened into something harder. You think this wins? No, she said. This ends. Lena, seated quietly along the back wall, pushed a series of files across the digital board. Financial records, transfers, Ellis's offshore dealings. Not speculation. Evidence. Investors began asking questions. Rapid fire, precise. Cold. Did you disclose these to the board, Ellis? Why were funds rerouted before vote consolidation? Is this a conflict of interest? Ellis's voice strained against the weight of the room. You're letting her manipulate. She didn't leak your secrets, one investor cut in. You did. The shift was complete. Jonathan lowered his gaze. Several board members turned their chairs slightly, not toward Ellis, but toward Amara. Ellis pounded a hand against the table once. You think you can take everything? She looked at him with surgical calm. I already did. The chairman's gavel fell. A motion for leadership restructuring was tabled. The fortress cracked open, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. The press storm broke before the vote was even finalized. Screens in the lobby glowed with headline banners. CEO Ellis Grayson under. Investigation for financial misconduct. New majority shareholder announced Amara Hill. Whistleblower files reveal years of suppression. By the time Ellis was escorted out of the building, the boardroom had emptied into chaos. Investors were already issuing statements. PR teams scrambled like ants under a burning sun. Security walked Ellis through the same revolving doors where, months earlier, He'd watched Amara humiliated. No one looked at him. No one reached for his hand. Power had turned to glass in his palms, shattered, cutting, useless. Amara watched from the top floor, standing behind the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply observed as the man who'd once told her she didn't belong now walked out with no title, no protection, and no echo of authority. Lena stepped in behind her. "It's done." "No," Amara said. "It started." Inside the boardroom, the chairman cleared his throat. "Interim leadership will be transferred to Ms. Hill. A formal vote will be scheduled within 30 days. Effective immediately, Mr. Grayson's access is suspended." The sound of his name stripped from Power was not loud. It was clinical. Administrative. Precisely the kind of voice that had once denied Amara entry. Jonathan sat rigid in his chair. "You won't hold this. The structure will eat you alive." Amara faced him. "I've lived inside its teeth my entire career. I know how it bites." Several board members shifted uncomfortably. They had supported Ellis for years, but Power doesn't mourn its last owner. It recalibrates. In the lobby, Ellis paused just outside the revolving door. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs hit him like gunfire. His jaw tightened. He said nothing. One of the younger security guards, the same one who had once blocked Amara at the entrance, held the door open for him without meeting his eyes. Poetic symmetry isn't gentle. It's surgical. That evening, Amara entered the CEO office for the first time as owner. The space smelled of expensive cologne, heavy wood, and the arrogance of men who had assumed permanence. She ran her fingers across the desk. The same desk where Ellis had once said, "Not your kind of room." The city spread out beyond the window. Cold, bright, unwelcoming. Lena dropped a folder on the table. "Press wants your statement in the morning. Legal's ready. Compliance is already tearing through the accounts." "Good," Amara said. "You should celebrate," Lena added. Amara didn't answer. Power didn't feel like triumph. It felt like scar tissue. Later that night, alone in the office, she opened her phone. Dozens of messages, offers, congratulations, opportunists cloaked as allies. But one message froze her hand. It was from Malik. A single line. "They'll never forgive you for taking their house." She stared at the screen until the glow dimmed. He wasn't wrong. The walls she'd broken were older than Ellis. She walked to the window and pressed her palm to the cold glass. The city below buzzed, unaware of the weight pressing into her chest. She had won the war, but the battlefield was still alive. The board's final decision came at midnight. An email flashed across the company intranet, effective immediately. Amara Hill appointed CEO. Ellis Grayson under federal investigation. Board restructuring to follow. Her name at the top of the page didn't feel like victory. It felt like evidence of everything it had cost. The next morning, when she walked into the building, employees turned. Some nodded. Some whispered. A few looked away. She remembered their silence the day she'd been denied at the door. She walked past them, her heel steady, her pulse not. At the front of the lobby, a new sign had been installed overnight. Access policy revised. Zero discrimination tolerance. A legal statement, clean cold. But she understood its weight. The same space that had excluded her was now forced to etch its guilt into the walls. She stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut. Above her, the floors no longer belonged to Ellis. They belonged to the woman who'd been told, "This isn't your kind of room." Now it was, and that was the beginning, not the end. The media burned through the story like dry paper. Anchors dissected board votes. Commentators praised historic shifts. Investors issued neutral statements about corporate responsibility. The public moved on to the next scandal before noon. Amara sat in the boardroom, the same room where they'd once closed the door on her. Reporters were gone. The legal teams had left. The photographers had collected their equipment. The air was silent now. Power, once loud and glittering, always ends in silence. Lena placed a stack of contracts on the table. The legal cleanup's underway. They've stripped Ellis's severance. The state wants to make him an example. Amara didn't look at the files. They won't remember him in 6 months. Lena hesitated. They won't remember you either. Amara's fingers tightened against the armrest. Lena wasn't wrong. Power is transactional. It doesn't build statues. It just replaces faces. She walked through the upper floors later that day. Employees pretended not to stare. A few gave stiff nods. Others whispered in corners, deciding how to rewrite their loyalties. One woman, who had once blocked her from entering a meeting, lowered her gaze as Amara passed. No apology, no words. Just a small movement. Fear, respect, calculation. Amara didn't slow her pace. She entered the conference room where it had all begun. The same polished table, the same empty chairs, the same faint scent of wood polish and institutional confidence. A memory slashed through. Ellis laughing softly, the guard's hand on her arm. Lena's whisper in the hallway. Don't let them break you here. Now the chairs waited for her voice. She stood at the head of the table, silent. The hum of the HVAC filled the space. This was power's true sound, not applause, not headlines. Silence. Malik called that night. The line crackled. He didn't congratulate her. They'll put you in the same chair they built for him, he said, and expect you to behave like nothing's changed. Amara stared at the city through the glass. I know. They're already waiting for you to fail, Malik added. That's how they keep the door theirs, no matter whose name is on it. She said nothing. The call ended with no goodbyes. The first board meeting under her name was scheduled the next morning. All the surviving members filed in, measured steps, calculated glances. Jonathan was there too, but he avoided her eyes now. A man stripped of certainty. She opened the meeting without ceremony. We won't pretend this is a clean slate, Amara said. Her voice was flat, steady. We're not starting over. We're starting on the blood of what you protected. The silence that followed was the only honest response they could give. Lena slid the new agenda across the table. Compliance reforms. Equity restructuring. Legal shields removed. Real consequences no one applauded. They adjusted their posture, recalculated their interests, and prepared to survive her. After the meeting, Amara returned to the lobby. She stood in the exact spot where the security guard had stopped her months before. Now the guard nodded stiffly as she passed. Not because he respected her, because her name was on his paychecks. She looked up at the new policy sign on the wall. It wasn't justice. It was a warning label taped to history. That night she sat alone in her office. The city lights bled into the glass. Emails stacked in her inbox. Deals, offers, lawsuits, strategic alliances. Ellis was already fading from the news cycle. The world didn't care about endings. It only cared about replacements. Her reflection stared back at her in the window. Not victorious, not broken, just present. Lena entered quietly. The board is already trying to shape the narrative, she said. They'll rewrite everything, Amara replied. Lena didn't deny it. Yes, Amara leaned back in the chair Ellis had once called his. It felt heavy, not triumphant. She closed her eyes and remembered the moment at the door. The humiliation, the weight of all the eyes that looked away. No speech would erase that. No title could, but the door no longer belonged to them, it belonged to her now. The building was quiet after midnight. The power structure she'd cracked open hadn't collapsed. It had shifted, rewired itself around her. That was the truth no headline would tell. Justice doesn't echo. It lingers, cold, silent, waiting to be defended every single day. Amara opened her eyes and stared at the city below. She hadn't won a fairy tale. She'd inherited a war, Ellis. Langford walked into the courtroom, wearing a charcoal suit that no longer fit like armor. Cameras flashed as he passed. Reporters shouted questions. None of them called him chairman anymore. The charges were financial misconduct, discrimination violations, retaliation. The evidence was clean, precise, unavoidable. What had once been whispered through hallways now sat in legal files stamped with the state seal. He stared at the prosecution's table. Lena sat there not as Amara's aide, but as the key witness. Amara did not attend the trial. She had no need to. The system that had once ignored her now devoured one of its own. She watched the broadcast in her office, head tilted, no reaction. Ellis tried to keep his voice steady on the stand. This is a vendetta. She wanted my seat. She used race as a weapon. The prosecutor's voice sliced through him. And this recording? The jury listened again. People like her climb too fast. They always forget who built the ladder. His own words echoed through the room like a verdict before the verdict. Outside, the city hummed as if nothing changed. Inside the courtroom, the world that had protected Ellis for decades folded in on itself. Jonathan, once his closest strategist, testified second. His tone was flat, self-preservation disguised as remorse. I knew about the transfers. I followed orders. The defense crumbled in real time. When the judge read the verdict, no one gasped. No one celebrated. Guilty. The sound was clean, clinical, final. Ellis's face didn't break. It emptied. Power rarely dies with screams. It dies in silence. Later that night, Amara walked through the hotel where the story began. Same lobby, same lighting, same polished marble. She paused at the security desk. The guard who had once held his arm out to stop her now straightened, like a man who knew exactly who signed his checks. She walked through without slowing. In the grand ballroom, the company's new annual summit had just ended. Cameras were being packed away. The stage was stripped bare. A single banner hung from the ceiling. Ownership is not permission. Its presence, Lena found her near the window. The press wants a quote, she said. No, Amara answered. Lena nodded. She didn't ask again. She stood alone after the hall emptied. The same building that once locked her out now echoed her footsteps. Her reflection in the window wasn't framed by applause or outrage anymore. Just wait, Ellis would disappear into legal footnotes. His allies would rebrand themselves. The investors would rewrite the company's story as if she'd been part of it all along. The world would move on. But the scar would remain where it was cut. Malik called. He's done, he said. I know. Does it feel like enough? No, she said. Justice is never neat. It doesn't restore what was taken. It only marks where it happened. The board was meeting in the morning. Policy reforms. Equity restructuring. A long, brutal cleanup. Lena lingered near the door. We're not done. Amara didn't turn. We'll never be done. She walked out of the ballroom into the cold night air. The city spread out before her, restless, indifferent, alive. Somewhere inside its glass towers, another door was closing on someone else. Another voice was being dismissed. Another ladder was being claimed. She had cracked one structure. Not the system, but one breach was enough for a beginning. The hotel's automatic doors opened behind her. The sound was soft, mechanical. Months ago it had been a barrier. Now it was just air moving aside. She walked forward. No spotlight, no triumph. Just presence. The war didn't end. It shifted, and this time she held the door.